Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. Today I'm back for my third installment in my Brave New World 2020 series, and today's title is this: Morality is for Dummies. So the past couple of months, I have been going over the book Brave New World, not the entire thing, but just some common themes on similarities that I am noticing between where our society is headed and what is in this book. And this book just so happens to have been written in 1932. Okay, 1932. That's important to remember because I think that you're going to see the similarities that I'm talking about. So the first two parts that I did were factory raised children and forbidden speech. And if you somehow missed those, I will leave a link. I will leave links to those in the description box below. But let's just get on with it right away. Morality is for dummies. Is that what I think? No, not at all. However, that is what the people in the Brave New World Society thought, and it seems like that's the direction that more and more of our society is headed in. So one quote that I wanted to read to you today from this book is, "If only they'd started on moral education," said the director, leading the way towards the door. The students followed him, desperately scribbling as they walked and all the way up in the lift. Moral education, which ought never, in any circumstances, to be rational. You hear that? Moral education, which ought never, in any circumstances, to be rational. Sound familiar? There are a lot of very irrational behaviors being taught in the public school system today, because in reality you will see the theme of Brave New World all throughout everywhere in the outside world. But since my channel is more about education and homeschooling, I'm sticking more to the education aspect of it, to the school aspect of it, and how school has something to do with getting people indoctrinated into this mindset. And yes, we are seeing a lot of very irrational behaviors being taught to school children. So for example, let's just start with the fact that in this book, the words mother, father, and family are considered to be taboo. In fact, those people who decide to go about and have families of their own are called savages, and they are tossed to the outskirts of society. And the people who are, more enlightened in this book, they actually go on trips to see these savages, those awful people who might actually have real families. So when people utter the words mother, father, and family in this book, they other people gasp. They can't believe that someone actually uttered those words. To them, they're just horrific words that you should never say. And this really reminded me of a story that I saw, probably a couple of months ago, where a teacher, it might have been a kindergarten teacher, I'm not sure of the grade, but I know it was elementary school, and she was being applauded for using the term "your grown-ups" with her students instead of your mother or your parents or your father. So for example, if she wanted them to have a paper signed when they got home, instead of saying have your parents sign this form, she will always say have your grown-ups sign this form. And to me, I think that it's a slippery slope, because what we're seeing is that the traditional family structure is being frowned upon more and more as time goes on. The traditional family is being scoffed at. For example, the BLM curriculum, I'll leave a link to the BLM curriculum in the description box. It is attempting to render the traditional family obsolete. That's actually one of the goals, not only of the BLM curriculum, but of the movement in itself. It is against the traditional family. So what is happening is that children in school are being taught that the traditional family, is not so normal, and that there are other types of families that really seem to be applauded in schools. They seem to be embraced. They're highlighted. And the traditional family is being crushed. And, studies show that children who come from two-parent households not only do better in school, but do better in life. So beyond that, beyond the fact, and that's serious enough, but beyond that, we have just promiscuity being encouraged in a lot of schools. So the sex education that kids are getting in school nowadays is not what we had. If you're around my age, what I had was very mild. It gave the facts, but it was not what kids are learning in school today. And kids are learning things as young as preschool. A lot of this is being brought on through Common Core. And they are really getting very graphic with a lot of these young children. And one interesting thing that I found is that a couple years ago, a school district that was close to where I am, they had a pro-life pregnancy center teaching that health curriculum. And parents were outraged because this group was encouraging abstinence. So in other school districts, so actually I have to say, so they stopped that group was no longer allowed to teach sex education in that school anymore, or in that district anymore. And I don't remember who they brought in to do it. I'm thinking that it might have been Planned Parenthood, but I'm not 100%. But even if that's not who it was, Planned Parenthood is teaching these things in other schools. And you can only guess what Planned Parenthood is teaching, because this is something that can be lucrative for them depending on the route that these children take. So they are not going to be taught abstinence. They are not going to be taught very often monogamy. They are going to be taught something that is going to be more fruitful in the end, not only for Planned Parenthood, but that is also going to bring about much of the instability that we have in our society today. And that is something that is actually reflected in this book. So in this book, like Mother, Father, Family, monogamy is something else that's almost looked at like as a mental illness. They just think that it's very strange. And I'm just going to read to you a couple passages here. It says, "And after all," Fanny's tone was coaxing, "it's not as though there were anything painful or disagreeable about having one or two men besides Henry, and seeing that you ought to be a little more promiscuous." Lenina shook her head. Somehow, she mused, I hadn't been feeling very keen on promiscuity lately. There are times when one doesn't. Haven't you found that too, Fanny? Fanny nodded her sympathy and understanding. But one's got to make the effort, she said sententiously. One's got to play the game. After all, everyone belongs to everyone else. I just can't help but cringe at the thought of that, but that is what we are seeing. A lot of children are just being brought up with the mindset that waiting until marriage, abstinence, monogamy are things of the past, and that it's totally okay to be passed from one person to the next. In fact, that's looked at more normal now than the people who do practice abstinence. It just goes on to say, yes, everyone belongs to everyone else. Lenina repeated slowly and sighing, was silent for a moment, then, taking Fanny's hand, gave it a little squeeze. You're quite right, Fanny, as usual. I'll make the effort. And so what it was trying to insinuate that she was repeating it slowly is because the reason that they think this way is because they had been neurolinguistically programmed to have these thoughts, which I talked about a lot in my Brave New World video. I don't think it was called Brave New World. I think it was called You Are Being Programmed. I spoke a lot about neurolinguistic programming, and I brought up a lot of the passages in this book that have to do with it. So I'll leave a link to that also. But anyway, I just happened to see this as I was going through here. I talked about how people who actually go about having families the natural way, in this book, children were, they were created in a lab. So there was no such thing as family. There was no such thing as mother, father, sister, brother, except for those savages. So, and here's just an example of that. She just says, because I do want to see a savage reservation. And then he says, you're hopeless, Lenina. I give you up. So yeah, they want to go to a savage reservation, those people who are tossed out of society, because They want to do things the natural way, and this is not the way that the Brave New World Society wants them to be functioning. So another aspect, when I spoke about how they are bringing these sex education lessons into really young children's classrooms, this is something else that you do see here in Brave New World. So I'm just going to read to you one more passage from it. And in this, I'm going to spell out the word sexual, just because I don't know with the algorithms what it's going to do, because you just never know nowadays. So that's why I'm spelling it out. But it says here, and again, this is regarding, there's a group of people and they're going around and they're seeing how children are being raised and trained in society. Outside in the garden, it was playtime. Naked in the warm June sunshine, 600 or 700 little boys and girls were running with shrill yells over the lawns, or playing ball games, or squatting silently in twos and threes among the flowering shrubs. "That's a charming little group," he said, pointing. In a little grassy bay between tall clumps of Mediterranean heather, two children, a little boy of about 7 and a little girl who might have been a year older, were playing very gravely and with all the focused attention of scientists intent on a labor of discovery, a rudimentary sexual game. I can't spell anymore. "Charming, charming," the DHC repeated sentimentally. "Charming," the boys politely agreed, but their smile was rather patronizing. They had put aside similar childish amusements too recently to be able to watch them now without a touch of contempt. Charming, but it was just a pair of kids fooling about. That was all, just kids. And earlier, I forgot to read this section too. They were just talking about in this book how the group of children said that they had just had elementary sex for the first 40 minutes. And I'm assuming that is, just a class. But then it goes on into play, and that is what the children's playtime looks like. So I find it very troubling that we have children 4 years old. We are not living, although it might seem like we're living in a dystopian fiction right now, we're not. But it seems like we are being modeled more after these books every day. And children who are 4 years old should not be knowing the things that they are hearing in school nowadays. Children who are 5, 6, even 7-year-olds should not be hearing the things that they are hearing nowadays. But the fact is that is what is now being portrayed as normal. And all of those traditional values and the values of just right and wrong and protecting your children, they're gone, and now we are beginning to be looked at as those savages. We have drag queen story hour happening at a lot of schools nowadays. This isn't something that 20 years ago you would have ever thought was going to happen. So that's why, it's scary, because the first time that I read this book, I thought to myself, wow, I could definitely see this eventually starting up around here. But now I'm rereading it and it's like, okay, this is happening. I do see this happening presently in our world. So all of these things, when it comes to children being raised, factory raised children, we've got children in schools longer than they are with their own parents. We have forbidden speech. Children are being taught this political correctness throughout school, things that they should and should not say, things that are okay to say, thoughts that are okay to have. And then now we have morality is for dummies. Children are being taught morals that run contrary to those that run in their families. And what is happening is that a lot of these children are now looking at their families as these savages. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave it over on Instagram because YouTube disables my comments. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.